What's going on, people? Today we're about to break down episode 26 of Attack on Titan Season 4, in which an all-out war breaks out between the Scouts and the YEAGERISTS. In this video, I'll be explaining everything that I thought was interesting, including the return of the female Titan, Magath's change of heart, and how far Connie was willing to go to save the world. Before we get into it though, I do these reviews every week, so I'd appreciate if you hit that sub button, and as usual, drop a like if you like the video. Also, if you stick around till the very end, then you'll see an exclusive preview from my upcoming video about the alternate reality where Eren got the Colossal Titan. Okay, so in the last episode, the Alliance were discussing how they planned to stop the rumbling, and one of the things they agreed was that they needed to get access to this flying boat. Earlier in the season, Kiyomi was the one who brought this special plane to the island, and right now it's the only thing that might be fast enough to reach Eren in time. The problem, however, is that when they finally made it to the port, the YEAGERISTS were already there and had locked the place down, with Floch holding Kiyomi as his personal hostage. Episode 26 begins through the lens of a telescope, as Magath and Hange observe the situation from a distance. The general notices that the flying boat is still in one piece, which is surprising because if the YEAGERISTS were to destroy it, then it would end any chance of the rumbling being stopped. Regardless, there were a few plausible explanations as to why they hadn't done it yet, with the first being that at this point, Floch didn't know for certain this alliance to stop the rumbling was a thing. Technology like this would take decades for the island to recreate, meaning that it's smarter to keep the flying boat intact until they have a good reason not to. Of course, if Reiner and the gang were to attack, then that would be a valid justification for the YEAGERISTS to tear it down, putting the alliance in a very delicate situation. If they make a wrong move, then their one method of reaching Eren will disappear, so whatever strategy they choose, it basically needs to be perfect. When it comes to Annie, her suggestion was to quickly massacre the enemy in one go by using the combined power of their Titan shifters and other weapons. If successful, it would mean that the YEAGERISTS would be wiped out before they have a chance to destroy the ship, but this plan caused the Scouts to hesitate for obvious reasons. Many of the people defending the port are friends they've known since all the way back in the cadets, and Connie especially didn't seem comfortable with killing them. On top of that, Mikasa highlights that an all-out attack would also lead to the Azumabito getting hurt, which is something that can't be allowed to happen. Besides the fact that they're her distant relatives, the Azumabito need to be kept safe because they're the only ones who can prepare the flying boats. Onyankopon goes on to explain that although he has the skills to pilot the plane, Hizru's engineers are the ones with the knowledge on how to prepare it for flight, and without them it won't be able to get in the air. Therefore, the Alliance had to think of a plan that would prevent the boat from getting destroyed while giving the engineers time to set it up, while also hordes of YEAGERISTS might be trying to kill them. By itself, that mission would be difficult enough, but the fact the Scouts want to do it without causing deaths makes it virtually impossible. Annie then throws some shade at Armin by asking him to tell her his grand plan, just like he did 4 years ago when he lured her into a trap. On that occasion, he told her a completely fake plan in the hopes that she'd follow him underground. However, in the present day, he doesn't seem too proud about what he did, and in my opinion, it's because seeing Bertolt's memories and, seeing things from the warrior's perspective, it's made him empathize with what they had to go through. Anyway, soon after this, Connie has an outburst as he's still not on board with the prospect of killing his fellow islanders, which causes Annie to come to a realization. Although the warriors might have an obligation to save their homelands from being trampled, the Scouts never had this burden, and they shouldn't be forced to murder their own people if they don't want to. She goes on to say that if these four had been in the same position as the warriors, then they wouldn't have attacked the walls and started this whole war between Marley and Paradis. These words caused Reiner to recall what Eren said to him back in Liberio, and I'll explain why he thinks of that in this moment. If we flash back to the whole scene, Reiner had just admitted that Annie and Bertolt wanted to end the mission, but he's the one who convinced them to keep going and attack Walmaria. In Eren's mind, this confirmed to him that he and Reiner were the same, since they each pushed forward to wipe out their enemies, even when the people around them were against it. In both situations, they dragged their comrades along to help put an end to countless lives, and in the present day, Reiner makes the decision that he doesn't want to drag any more people into this conflict. He tells Connie and the rest of them that they don't need to interfere with this upcoming battle, and urges them to stay behind and watch the fighting from a distance. Now, moving on, earlier in the episode, Hange noticed something about the rumbling that made her stand up and take a look. What's happening here is that the Wall Titans have entered the water and are now swimming to Marley, and because they're so hot, the water begins to emit steam. The steam gives a clear indication of how fast the Titans are moving, and based on this, Hange estimates that some of the Titans have already arrived on the continent. This means that towns and cities to the northeast of Marley have almost certainly been trampled, and the news causes Magath to take immediate action. Pushing Onyankopon out of the way, he shoves Yelena against the rock and stomps her arm into a different dimension. The general covers her mouth so that her scream doesn't draw any attention, and the reason he's torturing her is so that she'll tell him where the founding titan is. Even though her will to live was pretty low before this, the way things have progressed have made her interested to see how this all plays out, and in the end she basically says that she'll tell them his location if they bring her along. Following that, Magath then looks up at Gabby and has a clear look of regret on his face, similar to what happened the night before. Back then, he went to reach out to her because he felt guilty about the fact that Marley's brainwashing had robbed her of a normal childhood, and this is the case not just for Gabby, but for Reiner and the other warriors as well. As the head of the unit, Magath played a significant role in making this happen, and here he apologizes for the things he said around the campfire. The argument he had with Jean was simply him trying to justify his own actions, because deep down he knew that both himself and Marley were awful for the things they've done. Last night he was too afraid to accept that, which is why he put his hand down, but after seeing the things he's seen, his perspective on Eldians and the world has now evolved. That being said, the general does still want to stop Eren, not only to save Marley, but also so that future generations can learn about their mistakes. It's interesting that when he talks about future generations learning their history, the anime pans to show us Yelena's expression, as her motivation for helping Zeke and lying about her heritage was so that she could be part of a legend that future generations would hear about. Meanwhile, down by the harbour, Floch was seemingly having the happiest day of his life as he observed the Wall Titans rapidly pacing towards the globe. He explains to Kiyomi that his rule will be trampled just like all the other nations, which I thought was a bit harsh considering that they were the one country who were actually willing to work with Paradis. If anyone was going to be spared, it would have been them, but this line is basically a confirmation that Eren really is taking no prisoners. Anyhow, in this scene we can see that Kiyomi wasn't his only hostage, as there was a room full of terrified engineers, at least 3 of whom had been killed already. Floch previously mentioned that one of his main jobs is to wipe out any resentment left on the island, and so he's taking the same approach with Hizuru as he did with the volunteers. That approach is that anyone who doesn't do what they're told or tries to resist is executed, while everyone else will be allowed to live if they're willing to contribute to Eldia going forward. As he continues to ramble, Kiyomi then interrupts him and tells Floch that the violence won't end even once Eren has wiped out the rest of humanity. We know for a fact that what she's saying is true because even before Marley first attacked, there was still a ton of bloodshed on the island, whether it was state-sponsored executions, serial killers on the loose, or political assassinations. Kiyomi's opinion is that it's pretty much human nature for these things to continue like they always have, and he even accepts that she does have a point. He goes on to say, however, that what's important now is for people to know their place in the world, and that was a thinly veiled warning to everyone in the room. Essentially, he's acknowledging that their society on Paradis is more primitive compared to the rest of the world, and that while it would be nice to have Hizuru's tech, it's not essential for their survival. In that way, he's telling Kiyomi that he's not afraid to kill them, and that the Azumabito clan need to do what they're told if they want to live. Despite all of their technological advancements, in the new world that Eren is creating, their place is now below the YEAGERISTS, and this is what he's trying to make her realize. Suddenly, out of nowhere, Connie and Armin interrupt this conversation as they ride into the harbour on horseback, and this was the beginning of their plan to get to the flying boat without killing anyone. Phase 1 of this plan involves convincing the YEAGERISTS that they're all still on the same side, and to do that, he claims that they've been chasing after the warriors this whole time, and now the armored and cart Titan have escaped by sea. The implication here is that Floch needs to let them use the flying boat so that they can continue chasing after the enemy, and for that reason, they also need to let the Azumabito prepare the flight. He and Connie then rush towards the plane while telling Floch to release the mechanics, and as they get closer, we see it's being guarded by Daz and Samuel. These 4 have all known each other since they first joined the cadets, and Daz in particular is memorable for being the most anxious and possibly the most useless of the entire group. Regardless of that, he and Samuel are now both proud YEAGERists who are fully in support of Eren's plan to rumble all life beyond the walls. It was them who rigged this flying boat with explosives in case it needed to be destroyed, causing Armin and Connie to hysterically ask them to disconnect it. In this scene, you can tell that Samuel is hesitant to do that, since there are suspicions among the YEAGERists that these two are working with Marley. Floch first began to suspect this when Mikasa and the rest of them went missing, but after a brief back and forth, Daz is eventually convinced to disconnect the detonator. With the explosives now being inactive, the two of them have an almost terrified look on their face, and that's because during this whole interaction they were nervous that their plan wouldn't work. Inside the building though, Floch's suspicion continued to grow as he began to poke holes in Armin's story. When the 2 scouts arrived, they claimed that the warriors were heading south, so logically if Armin knew that, then it would have made more sense to pursue them by train rather than on horses. The events of the last episode demonstrated just how much more effective that would have been, and there's also the fact that the scouts were sneaking around without asking any of the YEAGERists for help. Even though he had no evidence that they'd been betrayed, his inescapable gut feeling was that something was wrong, so to deal with this, he decides to execute more of the remaining mechanics. A second meaning we can draw from this moment is that in Floch's mind, even if Armin's story is true, he doesn't think the warriors have a chance of stopping Eren by themselves. Anyway, as he goes to kill one of the engineers, Ambassador Kiyomi leaps out of her chair and the scene pans out to a point where we just hear 3 gunshots. The sound of these shots lets everyone in the port know that something isn't right, and in the room, Floch is getting whooped by a middle-aged woman. Some more Jaegerists then burst in after hearing the gunshots, but before they can kill Kiyomi, Mikasa crashes through the window and deals with both of them. We know that Floch already had his own suspicions about her, so after seeing this betrayal, he clumsily uses his gear to break out and lets his soldiers know the situation. This leads to an instant reaction with many of the Jaegerists swooping in to blow up the room, and Mikasa only barely makes it out as the explosion throws her into a wall. On the stairs, the Azumabito were then confronted by more soldiers, but these ones were killed by Hange and Magath, who's now ditched his Malian uniform in favour of the Survey Corps jacket. Their mission right now is to get everyone into the basement so that Reiner and Annie can go wild with their Titans without needing to worry about collateral damage. Before we get into that though, down by the flying boat, a panicked Daz goes to reconnect the explosives. As Armin tries to step in, Samuel then brutally shoots him in the jaw, chest and stomach, but part of the reason he did this was because Armin has shifter abilities. His Colossal Titan means that he's able to survive injuries like this, which is why he ended up getting shot while Connie managed to avoid the same treatment. Having realized that they've been betrayed, Samuel is seriously hurt by this and starts to cry as he reminisces about this memory back in season 1. Back then, Sasha had stolen some meat from one of their superior officers, but her reasoning was that once they capture more land from the Titans, there'll be even more meat to go around. Following that, Samuel and Connie agreed with this and they were the first ones to ask for some of the meat she stole, and you can tell that since then, Samuel never imagined that they'd be in a scenario like this. Switching back to the Azumabito, they were hiding at the bottom of this staircase as the Jaegerists continued to bombard the entrance with thunder spears. Them being underground gave Reiner and Annie the freedom they needed to go wild, and this sequence of her using the ODM gear was by far one of the best cuts of the episode. The fact she hadn't practiced for 4 years made this even more impressive than it already was, and the warriors pull up behind Floch to manifest their Titans. Next to the flying boat, this Titan lightning catches Samuel by surprise, and while he's distracted, Connie uses it as a chance to tackle him. Meanwhile, over by the rocks, the rest of the Alliance was observing, with the captain having woken up just in time to watch the show. The female and armored Titans then manifest soon after this, and the Jaegerist rampage that Annie had been asking for finally gets underway. When it comes to Connie, he and Samuel are fighting over possession of the gun, while Daz continued to reconnect the explosives. Zombie Armin then musters up the strength to lunge at him, cause like we've established, under no circumstances can the Alliance allow the ship to be destroyed. Eventually they get into a situation where Daz has a gun to his head, but when you take into account his personality, in my opinion there was a pretty low chance that he was ever going to pull the trigger. That being said, a low chance doesn't mean it's impossible, and an injury to the brain like this could be fatal even for him. Obviously we've seen that Reiner has survived worse, but in those situations he was able to transfer his consciousness, which isn't something that Armin is known to be aware of. I think it's fair to say that in this moment Armin was leaving his fate in Daz's hands, and over to the side, Samuel tries to understand why this is happening. From his perspective, this whole betrayal must be super confusing, cause they've been fighting for the same goal their whole lives, and now all of a sudden, Connie and Armin are switching sides to save people that hate them. This is when Armin flashes back to something Bertolt said when he betrayed them, which is that someone has to be the person to stain their hands with blood. In Bertolt's case, he hated himself for having to kill people, but he did what he had to do because he didn't really have another choice. Similarly, Armin and Connie are now in pretty much the exact same situation, because they didn't want to kill anyone and they made that pretty clear, but now they've been forced into a corner where they have to choose between Daz and Samuel's life, or the lives of millions of innocent people. Ultimately, Connie chooses the latter, and this scene was done incredibly well because he shoots Daz, and then slowly realizes what he has to do next. In the manga version, it seemed like he just killed Daz and then instantly shot Samuel, but the anime does it way better because you can really see how conflicted he was in this moment. The episode ends with the haunting shot of Connie screaming over his friend's dead body, proving just how far he's willing to go to stop the rumbling. Anyway people, that was my breakdown for episode 26 of Attack on Titan Season 4, and if it helped your understanding of the episode in any way, then be sure to hit that sub button for more videos like this. Finally, as a quick thank you for those of you who stuck around to the end, I've been working on my newest installment of What If Eren Got the Colossal Titan. The new video will pick up immediately after the last part left off, with the Warhammer Titan confronting the scouts in Liberia. From there it spirals into an all-out war that covers literally the entire Malian continent, and one of my intentions was to show how Eren would see the weaknesses in Mali that could have been exploited. In the process, there will be characters on both sides who have to make hard decisions, and the second half of the video will be all about how the world reacts to these events. All the artwork and the script is now fully complete, and it's a pretty long script, so I'm hoping to record it all next week and maybe get the video out by Wednesday or Thursday, but if I can't get it out on those days, then it will be coming out probably the Monday or Tuesday of the following week. If you've watched this far, then I'm assuming you're a fan of the series, so I would say that you should turn on your notifications so you don't miss it, because you know, this is, in my opinion, my best ever video, so I'm trying to make it perfect. I want everything to be, you know, I want the editing to be good as well, so yeah, when it comes out, be sure to have notifications on so you don't miss it. Thanks for watching as always, and until the next one, peace out.